Welcome back to this episode of the Mayoral Podcast, everybody. Before I get into today's content, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you see here today. As a reminder, remember I will put time codes in the description below, so if there's anything you want to see me talk about, please feel free to jump ahead and do so. First topic, I haven't talked too much of finance on this show, but I'm going to hit on this subject here, which is from Reuters, and it says, exclusive, Swiss authority banks mull new rules to prevent bank runs, according to sources. So this is from November 3rd of this year. Same day, from Bloomberg, it says, Swiss finance chief says bank withdrawal curbs are not on the table. So what are we to kind of surmise from this? What are we to believe is actually the truth here? And I am on the side of the Reuters article that there is going to be potentially some type of limitation on the Swiss banking moving forward. And really, what does that mean not only for the U.S. economy, but what does that mean for the global economy? And why is this somewhat relevant to us here in the United States and then for the people that are abroad as well? So what you have to realize, or what you have to do, is kind of look back at what happened earlier this year. So the second biggest bank in Switzerland, Credit Suisse, defaulted and was absorbed by UBS, the largest bank in Switzerland. Now, ultimately, the taxpayers had to foot that bill to the tune of $13,500 per citizen. So what does that mean in US dollars terms? So if you take that number, 13,500, and you multiply it by the U.S. population, which is roughly 330 million, you come up with a bailout that the taxpayers, an equivalent bailout in the United States per capita of $4.5 trillion. That was the entire U.S. budget about 5 years ago in the United States. So that's a huge amount of money that the taxpayers are bailing out for this bank. So ultimately, you have to look at kind of like, what does this mean in US dollar terms? That's how I'm going to kind of quantify this. Again, I said this before, and I'll say it again, we're not great at scaling, and when I have an opportunity to kind of scale things in terms that I think are more relatable to people, or at least to what I would believe is my audience, which is the people in the United States, we have to compare that from one country to the next. So here in Switzerland, you look at it, it's got 807 billion US dollars is their GDP according to the World Bank for 2022. Compare that to UBS, now the largest bank. It has been the largest bank, but they absorbed Credit Suisse earlier this year after they defaulted. They have 1.644 trillion assets under management. Now, let's compare that to the United States. 1.6 trillion. That's a lot under management. Compare that to the two largest banks of the United States, and it's about roughly half of Bank of America and about 40% of JP Morgan Chase. So if you were to add those two together, JP Morgan and Bank of America, and say, what would happen if those two defaulted? I think everyone in their mind would say, okay, if those two defaulted, it would be absolute chaos if that happened. So I'm trying to put this into context of the potential limiting of withdrawals from UBS to what it would mean in the United States. So when I said earlier, I believe the Reuters story that the Swiss government is actually potentially entertaining limiting the withdrawals, then you will see exactly what I'm talking about here. Again, if Bank of America and JP Morgan went down at the same time, what would that look like in the United States? So the United States GDP right here is $25 trillion. It's $25,462 billion, which is $25 trillion, $25.4 trillion. So what I do is take that number and compare it to Bank of America and JP Morgan defaulting at the same time versus what it would mean for UBS to default in Switzerland. The total assets under management for the two largest banks in the United States compared to GDP is 27.7%. Again, it would be cataclysmic if that happened in the United States, if those two simultaneously defaulted and had to shut their doors, okay? In Switzerland, remember, their GDP is just over $8 billion, and the assets under management of UBS is $1.6 trillion, which means UBS assets under management is 207% of the GDP of the country of Switzerland. So if UBS were to shut its doors, it would be nearly 10 times more devastating to Switzerland than Bank of America and JP Morgan shutting the doors at the same time for the US. So why does that matter in the United States and globally? And if you look here, this headline here from CNBC, and it's just talking about, it says, why wealthy Americans love UBS, the secretive Swiss banking giant. And this is from June 2nd of 2023. What it says from this article, it says, quote, you can access their operations in Singapore, in New York, in more exotic places. But at the core, they will not be subject to some political influence because the Swiss government is leaving them alone. Or at least that's the perception, said Nicholas Veron, a senior fellow at both the Peterson Institute for International Economics in D.C. and the Bruegel, I don't know if I'm saying that right, think tank in Brussels. Global watchdogs have worried for years that banks like UBS have become too big to fail. Now, this bank is now too big to bail. Like, they can't bail this bank out. This isn't even JP Morgan. This isn't even Bank of America. It's those two combined times about 9 is what this means to the Swiss financial system. This cannot even be bailed out by Switzerland. So really what would happen if UBS failed, and who knows where all this wealth is being stored or who is storing their wealth in these Swiss banks. People don't even know how much money is there for not only wealthy people in the United States, but wealthy people around the world. If that bank were to fail, it would have to be bailed out by global banks, not just the Swiss government. It cannot fail. So therefore, that's my point in pointing out that this cap on these bank withdrawals from UBS is something that's realistically in the cards in the future. And if they can do it there, they could really do it anywhere. And again, my point is to draw this all together, what this means for the world economy. If this bank were to fail, the world would have to bail this bank out. And I don't think that they want to bail this bank out. When the Swiss finance chief says that it's not even on the table, I tend to not believe that person because it's not even really her decision or the Swiss government's decision. People around the world, the globalists, can see that if this bank fails, they are going to have to bail it out. So in order to prevent it from failing, and I went over the failure of the fractional reserve system in one of my previous episodes, so go back and check that out. They know that this bank cannot fail, and if there's a run on it in Switzerland, it's too big for the Swiss government to bail. So it has to be bailed out somewhere else, and these banks across the world and the World Economic Forum type people are not going to want this to happen. So they are definitely considering this, if not going to implement this in the very near future. And again, if it could happen here, it could happen anywhere. So meanwhile, last week, the Nashville shooter manifesto was finally released. Well, parts of the manifesto was finally released. Steven Crowder, I think most people that would watch this show probably know who Steven Crowder is. If not, give him a follow on Twitter. He's at @scrowder on Twitter. And this is just a couple of screenshots from the manifesto. I'm not going to zoom in on it, but you can see their handwritten notes here. And it says certain things that are pretty disturbing in this manifesto. It says Death Day, calling the day of the shooting Death Day. This was clearly something that was pre-planned. And it says manifesto targeting, quote, crackers. People with white privilege want to kill you, little crackers, is what it says. I hope I have a high death count. I'm ready. I hope my victims are not ready to die. So just like kind of very disturbing things. Now, it makes you wonder why this manifesto, or at least the details, the motivation around this manifesto, took so long to release. And other manifestos, like I mentioned before, the Buffalo shooter, the Uvalde shooter, things like that, have been public almost within days. Now, it's because it doesn't fit the narrative of the mainstream media. This was a transgender person that shot up this school, and it was targeting white kids. If it was the opposite, if it was a straight white male targeting black kids, like what happened in Buffalo, that was released within the matter of a couple of days, and people were well aware that was the motivation behind the shooting. Now, you have to take a consistent stance with these and either say all of them, or at least the motivation behind them is released, or none of them are released. So I'm on the side of let the people know what happened and why it happened. That's my side. But if you're going to take the side of this should not be released, you need to take that same side when there's a white supremacist like what happened in Buffalo or what happened in Uvalde, any of these other manifestos that are out there. If you think that one of them should be released, then all of them should be released, regardless of the motivation behind it. We should not be protecting these people, or we should be protecting everyone from the evil of these people. That's the stance that needs to be taken. And because the media doesn't have any interest in this, because they know the identity of the person who committed this mass shooting, they swept this under the rug. No interest at all in the manifesto. If it was the other way around, like the one in Buffalo, like I've just mentioned, they would be all over it, and they were. And we got that within the matter of days. So just be consistent with your stance is what I'm saying. So switching gears to something still in the culture war, and I've pointed this out several times in the past, and I've kind of decided that I've left off a little bit of what the culture wars are kind of based around in today's day and age, which typically is race, LGBT stuff. Now it's because of the transgender stuff, it's gone into women's rights and women's sports. It also includes things like climate change as well. So this is a post from Carly Lloyd. She was somebody who was on the U.S. women's soccer team. She won a couple of gold medals in the Olympics and a couple of World Cups, I believe. So she was playing on arguably one of the most successful women's soccer teams of all time during that stretch, that 8-year stretch, whatever it was for the U.S. women's soccer team. And she's responding to this post on Twitter. It says, "What up, Alexi? Yes, it's true. Thousands of people have already brought that up. They were good. We actually lost to a youth Bayern Munich team in my career as well, but then we went on to win the Olympics and World Cups. So ... This is the crux of the argument that people like me are making. Arguably the best women's soccer team of all time, and you're losing to youth teams, youth male teams. What does that tell you? That tells you that they're not on the same level as men. And these are presumably, I believe this was like a 15-year-old boys club is what he's referring to. There's a youth Bayern Munich team that she said that they lost to. If they're losing to 15, 16-year-old boys, what are they going to do against 20-something-year-old men that are the best in the world? They would have absolutely no shot against these people. And this is the argument that we've made, and this is the argument that I've pointed out before. This only seems to go one way, and that way is to essentially eliminate women from some of these competitions. And if we were to do things like Neil deGrasse Tyson claims is a good idea, like do things on a hormonal spectrum, at what point would you even get to this women's soccer team? Like if we just did it like, okay, it's based on testosterone levels, at what level would we get to where they would then compete? And who's funding all these leagues? There's not an appetite around the world for 10,000 different leagues to see the 10,001st league be a league full of women or mixed between men and women. Because, that is essentially what you'd be looking at with some of these sports. Your soccers, your basketballs, track and field events. Like, there's not an appetite for that. There's not an Olympics for somebody like DK Metcalf, who is an NFL star for the Seattle Seahawks. He ran a 10.3740 in an event in 2021, trying to showcase his speed. He came in 9th place out of 9 competitors. And that 10.37 would have shattered the women's world record. This guy wouldn't even be able to step foot on an Olympic track. He's a phenomenal athlete, but he can't compete with those athletes. And the women, the best women's time of all time, would have lost by more than a tenth of a second to DK Metcalf on that day. So, and how many people are in between DK Metcalf and even the qualifying for the Olympics? There's tens of thousands of men out there. So where would you finally come down on a gender spectrum and say, okay, now we have a group that women can now compete in? It's just the dumbest thing. It only goes one way, and these people either are willfully ignorant to it, or they just don't care. Those are really the only conclusions that I can draw from these type of stances when it comes to transgender people and women's sports. One of the best Olympic teams of all time, one of the best women's soccer clubs of all time, going down to youth men's club. I don't think you really need much more than that. So continue on with the culture wars here, and this is a climate. And again, I just mentioned climate change, part of the culture wars. You're a climate denier if you don't think that climate change is the biggest threat to humanity, like Joe Biden thinks that's a bigger threat than nuclear war somehow, and people go along with it. But this is showing this happened. I believe this was in Panama. It doesn't say here on this post, but I believe that this was in Panama. There was climate activists trying to block a road, and this guy shot these people for protesting. Now, clearly this guy needs to be put away. You can't just open fire on somebody, even if they are breaking the law. Presumably in Panama, you can't block traffic. Like in the United States, that's against the law. So I'm for these people. I don't agree with their stance on climate change, but they should be allowed to publicly protest so long as they're not breaking the law. And something like blocking traffic is not only dangerous for them, it's dangerous for bystanders, people that are just walking by, and it's dangerous for the motorists as well. So like that type of stuff, these people need to be arrested for, but they also shouldn't be shot for that level of protest. But it is illegal. But again, this is just showing how crazy things have gotten. That this guy got fed up with all these climate activists blocking streets, and maybe he hasn't seen it before in person, but I'm sure he's seen it all across the news. These activists just doing whatever they want to, because they seem to either think that they have they're either more righteous than anyone else, or that they have a leg to stand on. And here's another example of climate protesters coming in. This is Fed Chair Jerome Powell talking. He's making a statement on the economy, interest rates, things of that nature, and a climate activist comes in here, starts yelling at him, and they cut the camera, but they don't cut the mic, and he tells him to close the effing door. So here I'll play this because it's actually a pretty funny clip of Jerome Powell. If you've ever seen him talk, he's pretty soft spoken, even for being as powerful as he is. But it's a pretty funny clip. I'll play it here.
Expect that the process of getting inflation sustainably down to 2% has a long way to go. The labor market remains tight, although improvements in labor supply and a gradual easing in demand continue to move it into better balance. GDP growth in the third quarter was quite strong, but like most forecasters, we expect growth to moderate in coming quarters. Of course,
Jerome Powell, by refusing to treat climate change like a systemic risk that
Thank you.
you are putting us at
Thank you very much.
economic disaster.
Thank you very much.
Climate change
Yep.
will threaten
Thank you. Just close the fucking door. Close the door.
JP, just close the effing door. I love it. But really, again, these people have, because of not only the current administration, but the media, the way that they treat climate change as this existential threat that we're all going to die tomorrow if we don't completely cut carbon emissions, is gone absolutely off the rails. And you see things like this. You see this person coming in, protesting at the Fed chair, his discussion about interest rates and consumer spending. And then same thing, you see what you saw in Panama with that guy shooting one of those climate activists trying to block the road. So it's really quite something to behold. You see things like this too. This is ultimately a result of their crazy climate initiatives, these globalists like Larry Fink. I've talked about him before, Blackrock. Here is Hamas supporters occupy Blackrock building. It's finally happening. The ESG monster they have created has come to eat its creator. So here, I'll play this video just to hear what these crazy people are ranting about Blackrock, who is really probably one of the main sources for them to think the way that they do, and they don't even realize it, and they're still coming after these people. They're still coming after Blackrock, and it's really something to behold, and it's really amazing. It's in an awesome way for me to watch these people protest the very people that created them. It's like Frankenstein's monster coming back for them. So here's the clip.
Blackrock, you can hide! Blackrock, you can hide! We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide! Blackrock, you can hide! Blackrock, you can hide! We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide! Blackrock, you can hide! Blackrock, you can hide! We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide! Blackrock, you can hide! Blackrock, you can
Blackrock, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. The left has such a way of making such amazing rhymes and getting these chants going. And again, it's really amazing to see these people show up at the doorstep of Blackrock. The people that complain about Blackrock and say that they're an evil corporation and we need to break them up and we need to change the way that they go about their business. They have too many assets under management. They are killing the fabric of the economy by pushing these agendas on these companies, because BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, they all own so much of the S&P and the Dow Jones and all these companies that they essentially, by proxy, are making their agenda, forcing that down onto the agenda of all these corporations. And it comes back to haunt them, as you see here in this piece. And again, I've never seen a video of people like me going to their headquarters and coming up with a bullshit chant and claiming that they're part of a genocide in somewhere overseas. It's really quite something to behold. It's not going to stop these people. I mean, Larry Fink's probably got enough security where he doesn't have to worry about it. That's the problem with these left-wing policies, is the people that are pushing them more than anything never have to really face the consequences of their own action. Now, this will be something that is played fairly frequently between now and tomorrow, and then it'll go away and people will forget about it, and BlackRock will continue on with their ridiculous ESG push. And again, I just pointed out because it's one of those things that, you know, that like it's coming back to eat their own. There was Dan Bongino has talked about this plenty of times. Is that he talked about it referring to cancel culture, and it's kind of in the same vein here, where eventually it was going to come back and eat its own, because at a certain point you run out of people on the political spectrum on the right that you keep slicing off more and more, and then all of a sudden the people that you're trying to cancel are pretty far to the left. And there's people that are on the right now that just don't give a shit. They're like, hey, go ahead, cancel me, whatever. And then once they don't get the visceral reaction that they want from these people, they then move to the next person, which again comes more and more to people towards the left. You see here, this is hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters are reportedly marching towards President Joe Biden's Delaware home as they accuse him of genocide. Another great chant here from the left. Here, let's listen into these people.
Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
We have a...
So again, people openly calling for genocide. That's frequently a Hamas, Hezbollah type of chant. The from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is meaning eradicate the state of Israel, and in the process, killing as many Jews as possible. This is, again, the mob coming for Biden. I don't believe that they actually ended up making it to Biden's home itself, but in Biden's neighborhood, now he's got to deal with it. You see this happened. This happened too in just outside the White House last week too. So here's that video. Here's what that looked like just outside the White House.
You can hear people around us are chanting Genocide Joe, and we're here at the gates of the White House. So, I mean, I can't think of a stronger message than the one that's being sent right now by the sea of protesters posted right outside Biden's front door, calling him Genocide Joe, demanding an end to U.S. funding of Israel's crimes in Palestine, and demanding for a ceasefire now.
Again, Dan was right. These people are coming back to eat their own. You see what just happened? We have Joe Biden in protest. These aren't right-wing protesters. These are far left-wing protesters. You see what's happening at Blackrock? Far left-wing protesters. They've created the monster, and now the monster is coming back to eat. It's really quite amazing to see. It's something that I'm enjoying watching from afar, and hoping that these people will learn their lesson. I know that they won't. One of the most prestigious institutions in the country, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. This is a professor teaching. I don't even know what he's teaching because it's something well over my head. And they're making room for a Palestinian protest afterwards. This guy here on the right-hand side, this guy right here on the right, with the hat on and the jacket and the green shirt with the white stripes. This guy is going to start a pro-Palestine rant after this professor is done with the part of his lecture. They're just carving out time for this nonsense at MIT of all places. I mean, I say of all places, but these institutions have been overrun with these radicals. And here's just another. This is just another day in the life of an MIT student. Here we go.
Times b plus mu times b prime. Yeah, I'm just going to finish this line. Can I just finish this line and then I'll give you the time. Right.
Asking for permission from this guy. Oh, can I finish my lecture? Like, you are the professor or adjunct professor, whatever this guy's position is. This guy wants to scream about Palestine as this guy's teaching God knows what. And these people here have to listen to this nonsense. Here we go. Continuing.
C and D, all right? Well, you're going to see that this is, well, by linearity, that's going to be D times lambda A plus mu A prime plus C, minus C times the rest. So minus C times lambda B plus mu B prime. And you find the formula. Yeah, go ahead.
As we witness the ongoing genocide of Gaza and MIT silence, I'm joining hundreds of students citywide in walking out of class along the center because we stand for the liberation of Palestine against the active genocide perpetuated by MIT, Israel, and the United States.
I'm going to stop it there. That's just insane. He's talking about MIT, Israel, and the United States. Like this guy... And this is our higher learning institution here in America. This is not just America, the West. This is what we've devolved into, is this type of insanity. The inmates are truly running the asylum. Look at the last few things I just showed you. Let me go back here. Let's start here. Climate activists being so emboldened, they're just stopping traffic. They've been doing this all over the country. Guy gets fed up, shoots one of the activists. Then you have Fed Chair Jerome Powell addressing the media about the economic position of the United States. Climate activists, just again emboldened to the level that they just feel like they own the damn place, no matter where they go. Hamas supporting people occupy the Blackrock building. Again, we saw that ridiculous chant. They're charging Blackrock with genocide for whatever the reason is. They're apparently judge, jury, and executioners now. Again, left wing, they can't be stopped. pro-Hamas protesters going to the Biden home in Delaware. I showed the other video of these same people trying to break down the gates of the White House. Silence for the media. Like, where's the insurrectionists or whatever claims you want to make? Like, they just don't seem to care. They don't seem to care about that. And then MIT, the most prestigious technical school in the country. This professor just making room for this insanity of this guy who clearly has nothing better to do with his life than try to lead some type of protest against MIT, a left-wing institution, which they all currently are left-wing institutions. And then you actually have a hero of all people, John Fetterman, a Democrat who is a very far left-wing radical in a lot of his positions. But on this, he's actually in the right here. So there's a bunch of pro-Hamas protesters. I'll play the video here without audio. And these people looks like they're getting arrested for whatever reason. And here comes John Fetterman. It's hard to miss him. He's 9 feet tall. He's got an Israel flag just walking through, just waving it, trolling at these people. It's actually pretty good. Give credit where credit's due. Here, John Fetterman deserves credit with that. And also, his stance has been pro-Israel during this whole time. He actually wallpapered the entirety of his office with the missing posters of those who've been kidnapped by Hamas. So good for John Fetterman and standing up for the right side. You know, again, give credit where credit's due. And Fetterman is on the right side there. And here we go. This is really just the sad state that we're in this country. It says a woman was killed during Charlottesville protest, and it was the number one news story for months, and I'll pull that up here in a second. It's an elderly Jewish man was just killed by a Hamas supporter in Los Angeles after being hit over the head with a megaphone. Will the media cover it equally? Of course they didn't. This happened last week. There's no mentions in the mainstream media, or basically no mentions in the mainstream media of what happened to this guy. And you see this guy here, and this is shortly before he died. He's already been struck in the head. He's bleeding, and ultimately he unfortunately ends up passing away from the injuries that he sustained in this altercation with this pro-Palestine protester, this pro-Palestine rioter, protester, whatever you want to call these people. At a certain point, like, you can't call these people protesters when they're bashing people over the head and killing them. That's kind of a 101 right there. And then you look here. This is the media coverage of what happened in Charlottesville. And in Charlottesville, back in 2017, it says, part of anti-Semitism in the United States and neo-Nazi in the United States. It says, Unite the Right rally. And this was in Charlottesville, Virginia, August 2nd of 2017. I think most of you probably remember that incident. It says, on the morning of August 12th, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe declared a state of emergency, stating that the public safety could not be safeguarded without additional powers. Within an hour at 11:22 a.m., the Virginia State Police declared the rally to be an unlawful assembly. So when it's the right, it's an unlawful assembly, and they need to institute emergency powers. One woman died. You see here, it says around 1:45, self-identified white supremacist James Alex Fields deliberately rammed his car into a crowd of counter-protesters about half a mile away from the rally site, killing Heather Heyer and injuring 35 people. So, state of emergency for that. One protest in Virginia where somebody died. I don't think that Terry McAuliffe was necessarily wrong about that. Don't get me wrong. If the protest got out of hand, regardless of what they're protesting for, whether you agree with these people or disagree with these people, and you have to disagree with these people if you have any sanity. Anyone who was anti-Jewish people just because they're Jewish is a disgusting human being. But like the ADL did in the 70s in Skokie, Illinois, they supported their right to free speech. They have the right to do this. They don't have the right to kill people. They don't have the right to break the law. They don't have the right to call for the death of people, like the from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free crowd. They apparently are allowed to say that and have no questions raised at all. There's too much ambiguity with that. There's people that are out there, there's video of these people saying that they want to literally kill Jews. Those people have crossed the line of free speech. They're no longer in the free speech range. When you start lobbing threats at people or calling for the death of people, that's a different story. Now, from the river to the sea, there's some controversy going back and forth. Some people say, no, that's just a cry for the Palestinian people. We want them to be freed. Some people are saying that that's an anti-Jewish. I believe it's an anti-Jewish claim. It's a let's eradicate these people, because that's what Hamas and Hezbollah and the Palestinian Authority, that's the types of things that they say. And when they say those things, that's what it means. Now, there are people that are just stupid and don't realize that that's what it means. So you could give them somewhat of a benefit of a doubt. But the people who are actually calling for the act of killing of Jews or murdering of people, those people have crossed the line. These people here got the media coverage, and they talked about it for years. They still talk about it to this day. This incident that caused the death of one person because some gross person named James Alex Fields Jr. deliberately rammed his car into a crowd of people, killing one and injuring 35. And that's a state of emergency. Again, not even disagreeing with McAuliffe here. Not even saying he was wrong in doing so. But there's been no such talk about that, of what's been happening over the last month in this country. There was no such talk. Donald Trump was a white supremacist. He was a racist for even thinking about saying we need to call the National Guard in 2020 when entire cities were being burnt to the ground, when the Portland courthouse was under attack for 30 plus days, when they took over a large area of Portland. Was it Portland or was it Seattle? I can't even remember. One of those crazy ones. A large portion, the Chaz zone, I think it was Seattle now, the Chaz Chop zone, and that was perfectly fine. No state of emergency was called there. Multiple people died, and it was racist if you called for a state of emergency. And McAuliffe doesn't nothing. Like they applaud him because these people were considered on the right side of the aisle. They had a state of emergency called against their protests that devolved into an attempted mass murder by this guy. So it just the way that they covered things, just insane to see this stuff. And I saw this on Twitter. Avi Yemeni. I don't know if I'm saying that right, so I apologize. It says this photo is not from Nazi Germany in 1940s. It was taken today in Melbourne, Australia. Harvey's Mart on Swanston Street. And this is from November 8th of 2023. And you see this anti-Jewish sign. It says boycott, and it's got the state of Israel with a Ghostbuster circle with a line through it. And this is acceptable, apparently, in Australia. If it was the other way around and this was an anti-Palestine flag, presumably these people would be thrown in the gulags forever, because that's, again, the state of the world that we are in today. Countries that are part of the West, they just can't seem to get out of their own way, and they can only see things from one lens. It's crazy. Then you see things like this, the FBI with a massive manhunt for a January 6ther in New Jersey. And it's just the amount of resources that they're pouring into this guy. Now, I don't know what this guy allegedly did, but I mean, just my God, like this for a January 6ther, like what did this guy possibly do? That this is what we're going, like you have a search, you have a manhunt. Look at this, they got military in for this guy. I mean, this is crazy for a January 6th suspect. Now, I'm sure that something escalated beyond January 6th, but they're issuing arrest warrants for these people, and this is the coverage that it gets on mainstream media, that this is the threat to the U.S. is this guy, this January 6ther. Forget about what's happening at the border. Again, this is NBC in New York. This is their coverage. This isn't my coverage. This isn't coverage on the right. This is them saying these types of images. This is the type of conditioning that you see. Like January 6thers are being hunted down. Meanwhile, caravans of military-age men claiming asylum at the border That's just swept right under the rug. The left does not give a shit about that at all. And this guy's the bigger threat. White supremacy, according to Joe Biden, biggest threat. Climate change. Forget about all the terrorists that have illegally entered the country in the last 2.5 years since Joe Biden took office. That's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you've seen here today. And I will see you all in the next video.